Hi everyone, and welcome to Noona's Noonchi, where I do a deep dive into some of our favorite K-dramas from a mental health perspective. Jeong, through shared experiences, specifically trauma. Trigger warning. I want to talk about two K-dramas, Just Between Lovers and What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. Both made my top 20. They're both on Viki. Just Between Lovers stars Juno, 2 p.m. and Jeanie, and What's Wrong with Secretary Kim stars Park Min-young and Park So-jun. Good dramas. Why? Because they do a good job showing the symptoms surrounding post-traumatic stress disorder. I want to talk about the Jeong, emotional attachment, bond, empathy, compassion that people may experience through a trauma that they both experience jointly, collectively, at the same time, different times. In this particular case, it's childhood trauma. What I like is Just Between Lovers does a good job describing it, in the synopsis, talking about the trauma, which is inspired by the true life tragic event, Sampung Baekgwajam collapse. I think it was 1995. It is actually the largest building collapse or event or peacetime disaster until 9/11. So that goes to show how big of an event this was. This was a department store collapse. Sampung, I think that's what the department store was called in 1995. So Just Between Lovers, it's still fictional, but it talks about that building collapse, okay, well, based on that. And then What's Wrong with Secretary Kim is a kidnapping, a childhood kidnapping that has many different complex parts. The chunk through that is all of the leads have that connection from childhood, whether they know it or not. I think that's important to say, that something's brought them together. Yes, the romance is cool and we focus on that, and that's the cute part of it. But really, what's threaded throughout so well, specifically in Just Between Lovers, is their trauma. Post-traumatic stress is really shown pretty accurately from what I know and what I've seen in Just Between Lovers. Also in What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. Just Between Lovers, things like flooding those memories, just seeing those flashbacks. And then you're seeing even the physical reaction to that, especially in Juno's character, right? The sweating, hyperventilating, and literally he hears voices. You see his post-traumatic stress. Also, he has physical repercussions. He was a soccer player when he was young, right? And obviously the building collapsed, all that leg damage. He also shows the way he's coping, I would say unhealthy manners of coping through dependency and painkillers, right? And we see that. That is also pretty accurate. Meaning, I'm pointing that out, meaning that also can happen from post-traumatic stress. How do you cope? Well, it's so difficult. You are traumatized, right? Then you have physical repercussions from whatever trauma. Painkillers, medication, getting dependent on them, or even addicted can happen. Also in Just Between Lovers that I thought was really good, sad, is how a tragedy, or in this case, loss of a child, can break up a marriage because both parents don't know how to cope with each other. I want to point that out because that's pretty realistic. You do see that happen, but what I want to see happen, obviously, is a marriage stays intact and they're made stronger together. But realistically, it can happen where a marriage falls apart because of a death of a child, in this case, Just Between Lovers, Wonjina's younger sister who was killed in the building collapse. Then we have Wonjina's character, right? And how she's dealing with the fact that she survived this trauma, so did Juno, and then obviously the side leads. But if I got into them, it's gonna be too long of an episode. And how they're really coping being survivors. Let's think about that. Post-traumatic stress, being a survivor of a trauma when other people were killed right before your eyes. And that's part of Juno's trauma. Hearing the voices of the person saying, save me, help me, when he couldn't, and then the person died in the building collapse, not his fault, but you end up having a lot of blame, and that's what happens with Just Between Lovers, Wonjina's mother, right? Drinking her sorrows away, unable to help herself, depending on her child, her daughter, Wonjina, to basically take care of her. Then you have What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, where they're both repressing what happened, suppressing the memories. We see flashbacks from both. Now, Park Min-young's memory is a little bit more, I would say, less tragic than Park So-jun's. And then in episode 12 and 13, you know how the K-drama flow works, right? 12 and 13, when there's a lot of reckoning. Well, in both dramas, there's a lot of reckoning in both episode 12 and 13. What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, Park So-jun admits things to his parents. What I really liked that I thought they did well, and probably not so obvious in the Korean culture, is that Park Seo-joon's parents apologized and asked for forgiveness in the way they handled the childhood kidnapping. They wanted to just kind of sweep it under the rug. Well, it's easier to do that, right? Avoid it, drink your sorrows away like in Just Between Lovers. It is. The avoidancy, it feels easier. But what it does is what you resist persists, right? So if you avoid an event, facing it, facing anxiety, facing your depression, facing that trauma effectively, guess what? It continues to loom over you like this dark cloud of anxiety and depression. And that's what I want to say to you is not good. And we see that when the parents are like, we just didn't know how to cope, so we thought it was easier not to talk about it. Yeah, that's typical of the Asian culture. But I really like that they admitted it, asked for forgiveness, and said, you don't have to accept it. You can be angry with us. I really like that. So for the first time in What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, Park Seo-joon was able to heal, I believe, in that episode where he was just crying because the parents allowed him, hey, be angry. Be able to express what you went through. Episode 12 and 13, similarly, Won Jin-ah character finally tells her mom off, is basically what I'm saying. Like, okay, I'm also a victim. Oh, did you wish I died instead? And the mom slaps her. And basically, she got stuff out that she wasn't able to. Not in the same way, the mother didn't really allow her that, but that was a moment she was like, I'm done. I have to let this out. I'm also part of the tragedy. And look at you. How can you help yourself? Good examples of post-traumatic stress. Now, also post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the mental health disorder diagnosis, mental illness. I'm not saying both of them technically had that, both the male leads, right? Or female leads. Technically not. I want to say, I don't know if I could diagnose that, if that makes sense. Diagnosing PTSD can be tricky. Sometimes there's acute stress disorder, which is immediately. Then there's chronic stress. Now, PTSD, sure, I think they do show signs of it, but I don't want it to be like, oh, that's what they have. Does that make sense? Because it can be tricky. In fact, some people may not be diagnosed with it and be completely fine. Perhaps they're repressing it, suppressing it. Park Min-young's character, you see that. Won Jin-ah's character, you see that as well. I thought that was interesting. 2 female leads suppressing, repressing. But I'm trying to get at the fact that Chang has bonded them together for life. And yes, they ended up being romantic partners. I don't think that's always the case. I just wanted to point it out because they're 2 very popular K-dramas. I really liked it. They're popular for obvious reasons, but I really looked at the traumatic story, right? What's Wrong with Secretary Kim? The description doesn't even talk about that. And then you go into like, I don't know, episode 3 or 4 or halfway in, early on, you're like, whoa, there's some trauma here, which I think is a big part of the story of why he's a narcissist. Just saying, survival. Don't forget, survival is a big part of experiencing post-traumatic stress. So if you want to have a better understanding of PTS or PTSD, watch both of those K-dramas in a different light. I'm sure you watched it because they both have great leads, but watch it now with a different perspective if you want to understand, especially in today's pandemic, what PTSD could look like and the symptoms that can last forever, perhaps, for years. Again, I'm not putting a timeline on it. You can live well with PTSD. In fact, that's what you see in both dramas. Now, Chuno's character is a little more sullen, but still living well. And then they both go to do rebuilding a construction, right? Going back to the site of trauma, which is interesting. What's Wrong with Secretary Kim faces things in his family with his brother, and then obviously Park Min-young and realizing that connection, Chang. I'm pointing that out to you because that Chang is pretty powerful. And also, you don't have to find Chang with a future romantic partner through a trauma. No, that's not what I'm saying. I just wanted to point a different perspective, going into a deep dive of both of those K-dramas showing post-traumatic stress. So I want to share those briefly. This is just we could go delve deeper into PTSD through those K-dramas. There's many more, by the way. Honorable mention, It's Okay, That's Love. It's Okay to Not Be Okay. Kill Me, Heal Me. A Beautiful Mind. Those are the quick things that come to mind. There's so many more that really show Chang also through healing of trauma. Just Between Lovers and What's Wrong with Secretary Kim are my choices that show accurate symptoms of PTSD. So I wanted to point that out. I hope you learned something today. Again, trigger warning. Feel free to contact me should you have more questions. Thanks for watching Noona's Noonchi. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so you can get notified of new episodes to come.